On this episode of the DTVC Extra podcast, we're going to finish our look at the Indiana Jones films, looking at Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I just call it Crystal Skull, so it probably doesn't help much. But also Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So those are the two we're looking at. So I guess we'll get stuck in here on the first of those. So where we left last time, 1989, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was a huge success. So it had kind of, in a way, brought back the magic from the first one after the second one was lackluster. But in some ways, I think it even surpasses some of that magic of the first one. It's the one that, I don't know. For me, I like the first one better, but I know a lot of people like Last Crusade better than even the first one. So when you have that kind of success, I think there was a thought of, okay, we'll turn around and we'll get a fourth one out there pretty soon. And I know Lucas was developing scripts in the early 90s with the plan to get back out there and do that next one as soon as possible. But there were some things that happened as well at that time. One of the things that I read kind of separately when I was looking up some stuff for Star Wars with the Mandalorian Grogu is that, in the 80s, especially after Return of the Jedi, you had the series of books that were being written. And some of them were written even during the those three movies being made. But a lot of these books are written where people are sort of expanding on the Star Wars universe. They're really starting to build it out. I mean, again, you think about, between 1983 and 1999, you don't have any movies. And so these books, these comic books that Marvel was doing, some of those, Jim Shooter says that those late 70s Star Wars comics were what saved Marvel financially until they kind of got things better with, X-Men and Daredevil and whatnot, and then Spider-Man, of course. But yeah, so as this world is building out, Lucas is seeing a lot of this stuff and saying, like, yeah, I like some of these ideas. And I think it inspired him to make that prequel trilogy, which one of the things is that they had sort of all of the people making those books and writing, the books, the video games, all of that kind of stuff, the comic books, they had left the immediate period before the first movie, or I guess it's now the fourth movie or whatever, the New Hope, before that took place. They left that period open so Lucas could do his prequel trilogy. And so he was inspired. There are a lot of ideas that he came up with, that he found from those books, like, Coruscant, this planet that's a city, right? That was from one of those books, and he's okay. I'm going to put it in the movie. Of course, he cameos it in his remake of Return of the Jedi, or his Lucas thing of Return of the Jedi. Lucas is in Coruscant in there. So I think that's sort of the first thing that puts Indiana Jones on the back burner, is now Lucas is all in on doing these prequel films, and so that takes him up to 05, right? 05-ish, 06-ish. So I think that was probably the biggest reason. Also, Spielberg was doing other things at the time, right? Jurassic Park was a big one for him. Obviously, Schindler's List was a big one. But there was this impetus towards the end of the 2000s that, Harrison Ford had said, hey, if you guys don't start making a fourth Indiana Jones movie, I'm out. And that got the ball rolling, especially with Spielberg and with Lucas. And so, initially Lucas, because the mindset there was that the first three films were kind of like Republic serials. So now if we get into the 50s, let's do like 50s low budget sci-fi, right? And he wanted to be like Invaders from Mars, and which I think would have been a fantastic movie. I know, talking with some of my friends about that, they were like, God, Lucas is crazy. I'm glad they didn't go with that. I don't know that I'm glad they didn't go with that. I kind of would have liked some Invaders from Mars, I think you could have done some fun stuff with that. But they ended up deciding to go with this Crystal Skulls idea. Now, when I think back to myself in 09, 08, 09, when that movie came out, I had just started the direct-to-video connoisseur at that time. So this was, I started that in 07. So we were kind of rolling on that. And I still had this sort of this jaded mentality when it came to big screen pictures. I wasn't really going to too many. I think at that time, 08, 09, I went to see, I guess I was going to see some more because I had friends who, I was living in Portland, Maine at the time, and I had friends that would go, especially on cheap nights, to see movies. So I would go with them to see them. But I really wasn't a big fan of big budget things. And in my mind, I remember that late 2000s period as sort of this rush to find new franchises. That was really the big thing. Is like, can we make a movie that we can make 4 more movies after? And it felt like Indiana Jones was being done in that spirit to me. I mean, reading about it now, I see that that probably wasn't the case, but at the time, that was really what I felt like I was seeing there. And so, of course, that also turned me off to it right away. Now, my roommate got it on DVD and brought it home, and so she was watching, and I figured I'd watch it with her. And I tried not to do too much MST3K on it and make fun of it too much for her because I know she wanted to enjoy it. But right away, there's that scene where they're in the Area 51 place or whatever with Indiana Jones, and he's using the gunpowder as metal to find where the crystal skull is. And it's like this big cloud of gunpowder that's floating around. And I started cracking up, and my roommate's like, well, what are you laughing about that for? Well, she was a big Lost fan. And I was like, oh, it's like the smoke monster in Lost. So, of course, which again, I was like making fun of 2 of her fandoms right there, with Lost and with Indiana Jones. Now, I say quickly, I don't know if anybody's lived with somebody who watches Lost. Now, I don't mean like you watch it yourself, you're a fan of Lost, but I mean, you're somebody who's in another room while Lost is on. The apartment that we were living in, my room kind of, it wasn't too far from the living room. So if you had a TV show on, you could hear it pretty well unless you had headphones or something like that. And I mean, the screaming and yelling of people being tortured on Lost was just insane. I don't know how people watch that show. To me, it just seemed a little bit much, but maybe when you're in the context of watching it, maybe it's not so bad, but just hearing the screaming in the other room was a bit much. But needless to say, I was not a fan of this movie when I first saw it, but I did, do a rewatch here for these episodes here. Again, spurred on by me doing Last Crusade on the Bulletproof podcast, and I don't remember if I watched this before or after I recorded with them. I think I may have gotten it in before, and then Dial of Destiny I definitely did after. But watching it again, I don't know that I have so many better feelings about it. It still kind of feels like, I guess reading more about it, knowing that they weren't really making it in the spirit. Honestly, whether they were making it in the spirit of wanting to do another franchise or not, I feel like that's why it was green-lighted. And to be fair, it was successful enough. The budget was like in the mid 100 million, something like that, 150 million, and it grossed like almost 800 million, which again, when you're talking about 08, 09, you still had the remnants of Blockbuster there, but also Netflix would still buy up copies, and you had DVD sales, you had physical movie sales as well. So if you make better than 3 times your budget back, that's really good at that time, because not only did you make your budget back, but you've got other sources of revenue that you can pull from, and they could, resell 4-movie box sets, all kinds of things like that. So, so this movie does really well. I think it was still nominated for a Razzie, which I could see as well. But yeah, maybe I'll get stuck in on some of the things I liked and didn't like about it. I think, the Russians or the Soviets as baddies, I think it's not that the Soviets were good, right? I'm sure there are a lot of people listening from Eastern Europe, maybe even have people listening from parts of Central Asia who can tell me very clearly how bad it was under the Soviet regime. So I'm not going to sit here and act like the Soviets were good at all. I think the thing I don't like is that it's the Soviets are evil and the Americans are good, right? That the Westerners are good, because we were just as bad. The United States was out there doing just as many bad things. I'm sure for every bad story that you get from somebody in, Hungary or Czechoslovakia or like the Central Asian republics, you've got people in, Central and South America, people in the Middle East, Africa, who have just as many bad stories. And I just don't like that monolith, and it's just kind of lazy the way it plays out. Now, to be fair, on the other hand, Cate Blanchett is a fantastic baddie. So while you've got the lazy Soviet baddie element of the movie, at the same time, you've got the really good Cate Blanchett baddie, which, she goes on after this to be the baddie in Thor Ragnarok and completely steal that movie too. So yeah, she's always fantastic. So it seems like a thing. Just keep casting Cate Blanchett as your baddie, and she's going to nail it every time. So I like that. I did like it that it took place mostly in the Western Hemisphere. I thought that was kind of cool. I like that they brought Karen Allen back. She just is a great actor, and I think she does a lot of, I don't know, for me, I just have a lot of fun with her in these movies, so I thought that was really good. The Ray Winstone thing, I don't know what's going on there where he's like double and triple crossing Indiana Jones, and I feel like that's a part where the story may have gotten away from them a little bit, where it's just kind of up and down, constant. You think about the other movies where you had double crosses and things like that. They were a little different when you had those double crosses. It was like, sometimes it would be like one big double cross and that was it, or something like that. This whole like, I'm double crossing you. No, actually, I was double crossing them. No, I'm double crossing you. No, actually, I'm bad. And I love Ray Winstone. He's great too. It was fun having him in the movie. One of my favorite parts is the very beginning where Indiana Jones is escaping from Area 51 after the Soviets. He's escaping from the Soviets, and he's driving his Jeep directly at them. And one of the other Soviets is driving at him, and Ray Winstone's like, "You don't know him. You don't know him." Meaning like, yeah, this guy's crazy. Don't try to just attack him on his terms, which I loved. I also have to say, right after that scene is, of course, the infamous refrigerator scene. And I loved that, too. I think if you're going to go bonkers, just go 100% bonkers. So that I appreciated. I read on IMDb somewhere that they were saying that that people would use, like, nuked the fridge as, like, akin to jump the shark. I don't know. I've never heard anybody else saying nuke the fridge in that context. Maybe people have. Maybe people have seen it on Twitter or something like that. But I've never, and nobody that I've talked to about movies has said nuke the fridge. But a lot of people say jump the shark. That comes up a lot. So, and I don't know that this movie, did it? Did nuke, the fridge thing? I guess it does kind of take the movie series in a place that it really hadn't been before. I don't know. When you do that sequence with the whole, the tank chase sequence in The Last Crusade, I feel like you've gone full on bonkers. And Indiana Jones hiding in a fridge and blowing up and landing, wherever he lands, that almost feels more par for the course than it does at that point. It feels like you're just sort of, or I guess to the other point is that it's sort of how the Indiana Jones movies set a certain bar and they keep trying to raise it. Maybe that's really what it is it's raising the bar. And to that point, I think there's action sequences that do kind of raise the bar, but then there's things that detract from those too, right? Like you've got that sequence in the Amazon where there's this big chase with the Soviets and, Harrison Ford and Karen Allen and Shia LaBeouf. And then Shia LaBeouf kind of disappears from them and he's like swinging on vines with monkeys. And you're watching that and you're just like, man, that's Spielberg, right? That's Spielberg kind of not I don't know, losing the plot a bit there. And of course, maybe this is a good segue here. Those monkeys and Shia LaBeouf swinging with those monkeys, that leads to his ouster from the series because he starts doing the press tour about this film and he's just killing that scene. He's like, yeah, but like he killed it in this really interesting passive aggressive way, right? He's like, yeah, maybe it's ridiculous writing or maybe it's bad directing, but as the actor, you've got to sell it. And yes, that's true. You got to sell it, but that's it. Yeah, I don't know. So like obviously Spielberg wasn't a fan of him after that. I think Harrison Ford called him a fucking idiot. Yeah, So and of course that's it for LaBeouf. But at the time, I guess in 2008, Shia LaBeouf was kind of an actor. I guess he was. We don't like to think of that now. I feel like there were some of us at the time who were already kind of like, really, Shia LaBeouf? That's what we're doing now. It did feel like a bit of a lazy casting decision. It felt like they were just sort of casting some kind of actor and putting him in the part. I think he does well enough. And of course, he's trying to pull this whole Marlon Brando Wild One kind of thing. I think he does it well enough. But I don't know. I don't know who I would have wanted to play him instead of Shia LaBeouf. I don't know who was out there at that time that could have been doing that part. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would have been born in the 70s that you could have had play that part and it would have worked just as well. But that was it for him. He was done after that one. So, yeah, I was trying to think like beyond some of these things, like my kind of my overall take on it. And I don't know. I did like that they moved it into the 1950s because for me, I guess I don't know if I would say that's my era of that kind of thing. When I was a kid growing up, you didn't see Republic serials on TV, right? The only real like kind of shorts like that would be the Three Stooges. Those were on all the time as a kid. And I guess like Our Gang and things like that would have been on. But the 50s, like the 50s low budget sci-fi movie and the 60s low budget sci-fi movie, those were on TV a lot, especially on weekends. And they were kind of perfect for TV because you could kind of put as many or as few commercials in them as you wanted. You could stretch them into a 2-hour thing and just have big long commercials. There's sometimes you'd have these like as seen on TV things that would pay for almost paid programs, and you'd have like maybe like a 5-minute commercial just in the middle of the movie. At least that's what I remember at that time. And so I saw a lot of those, and I was kind of excited for them to move the series into this place. And I thought Lucas did a good job, but it sounds like Spielberg didn't want to go as far as Lucas did. And maybe that's right. Maybe that's the right thing to do, because maybe my taste, if you put America's taste for movies under a bell curve, mine is like far out to like the left or right of that bell curve on the kind of wackiness that I like. I would have loved it if you had like flying saucers landing and moon men jumping out and then like chasing Harrison Ford on like hover ships or whatever while he's like speeding away on a Jeep. That to me would have been perfect. I would have loved that. So I don't know. Now, maybe this is a good place to transition here quickly too, because I think there was the video game that came out in the 90s that was like Harrison Ford, and it was like something about Atlantis, right? Where he was like, he was the Journey to Atlantis, or something like that. And I think a lot of people thought that was going to be the fourth movie. It kind of felt like it fit like as a fourth adventure. The title fit, all of it seemed like it was going in that direction. And they I think Dark Horse released a comic book series based on it as well. So you had all of that energy for that throughout the 2000s. And I don't know what made them decide to scrap that idea too, because I think that could have been an interesting one. I mean, what could have been interesting is if they did that one and then they did the Mars Men for the last one. I would have been all about both of those. And I think it kind of gets to this point that we'll probably get into in the second one, is that there is a lot that still really wasn't mined with Indiana Jones. But, these gaps in times with making these movies, it does cause issues. At this point, Harrison Ford is in his 60s. I think he was 66 when he made this movie. And so you can make him older, right? You can make him an older character. But that also means that, like, when you've lost these years in between that you could have been making other Indiana Jones movies when he would have been young enough to play the part really well. I know their initial plan was to only have 5 movies, but yeah, the 19 years that we go in between 2 Indiana Jones movies, we probably should have had 3 in between there. And those are 3 movies we'll never get back. We'll never have those again. And the Atlantis idea, the Martian, the men from Mars, like, I don't know, some of these things would have been really cool. And so I don't know, I guess, waiting 19 years for another Indiana Jones. And I don't know that I was necessarily waiting for it. I don't think it was quite the same as Star Wars, where, Star Wars, people were really clamoring for another Star Wars movie. I don't know after Last Crusade if I was clamoring for another Indiana Jones movie. I was more like, that was a really good end to the whole thing. I was cool with it being a trilogy. I think that would have been fine for me. And then maybe you do this other, novelizations and, comic books and, TV shows like the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. That would have been enough for me. And I guess when you come back with a fourth movie, for me anyway, when you come back from a fourth movie, I don't know. I feel like if you feel like you need to make it, it's got to be like on the level of like a Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And to be fair, I don't know how many movies you can make that are going to be that good. There's only like a handful of adventure movies that come close to those movies. And so I guess I came out of watching it the first time thinking like, did we even really need this movie? And I don't know that I come out of it watching again thinking like, yeah, it was great that they made this movie. Seeing the very end, seeing Indiana Jones and Karen Allen get married, and the hat falls on the ground, and then Shia LaBeouf scoops it up, and Indiana Jones takes it from him and puts it on himself, telling us, these aren't done. We're going to do another one of these, only to wait like another 15 years before they do another one. But yeah, I didn't, I came out of it thinking like I didn't need this movie. I didn't need, even for all the things that were good about it, and even the things that were, that weren't good about it. But I think to some extent the good things outweighed the bad things. But I don't know that I needed this movie. I don't know that this needed to happen, and I think that ultimately brings me back to this idea of like this period in the late 2000s, early 2010s of everything needing to be a franchise and creating new franchises or taking existing IP and turning them into new franchises. And this idea that that was what they were going to do here. Now, what happens is after this one is they don't just jump right in and make another movie. And so there's still another delay. It ends up being another 15 years, which I think just hurts this even more because it's like it ends up becoming a one-off for a good 15 years. And it's like, why did we do this? Why did we have this movie? I wonder too, because, I think of a lot of different intellectual properties. And again, this is one that was created solely by Lucas and Spielberg. I mean, I guess Star Wars was created solely by Lucas as well. But there's this mindset of like, when an intellectual property is created, that it needs to be mined is deeply for everything that it can possibly have, and just use it as much as possible and create as much as possible with it and do as much as possible with it. And maybe Indiana Jones isn't meant for that. Maybe Indiana Jones, and I think that was the feeling I had when I watched this the first time and I've watched it again, is that maybe a trilogy is what Indiana Jones needed to be, and that was it, and it could have been done. But I guess also see how when you come off of Last Crusade and you're like, hey, we got this thing figured out. We really made this one work. What if we do another one? Why can't we just bang out another one? And it'll be that good. And then, of course, again, time, you keep kicking the can down the road. And again, Lucas was focused on those Star Wars movies. I get that, that he wanted to make those. So, yeah, I don't know. But, I guess that's that, we got this movie. And I don't think there was a sense when this one was done that they were done making them, which, again, there wasn't a sense when the third one was done that they were done making them either. I guess I'm saying I was happy with it just being a trilogy, and I would have been happy if they never made these other ones here, these other two. But that was never their intention. They had always planned to do 5, which I found out that 5 was even an arbitrary thing in and of itself, that Lucas told Paramount that he had 5 movies planned when he only had the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, planned, and they had to scramble together and write the other ones after that. So then this idea that they were going to make 5 movies, and Harrison Ford was keeping himself in shape to make the other 4, 4 and 5, and I don't know that there was something that they really had to stick to. They're going to say, maybe you finish Last Crusade and you think, okay, that's it. We did it. We finished this thing. We're good. It's over. I don't know. And I don't know too. It's interesting when we talk about the 5th one coming up here. I do wonder if Disney, when they bought the rights to LucasArts or Lucasfilm or whatever, and they got the rights to this, if they would have just always wanted to make a 4th and 5th and maybe even 6th and 7th movie from Indiana Jones, if they just would have always been trying to push for that. And so maybe this 4th movie was inevitable, and we were always going to have it, and so we got it. And and I guess watching it the second time, I can say I don't think it was horrible. I didn't dislike it to the degree that I didn't like it before. I think it was more jaded Matt not liking it. But I will say it was a little bit better. I really like the interplay between Harrison Ford and Karen Allen. I think that was the best stuff from this movie. And when we get into the 5th movie, we'll talk more about that as well, because we get a little bit of that kind of, in a way, I don't want to say it saves that movie for me, but it definitely helps out there. So I was trying to think if there's anything I forgot. I mean, of course, I didn't mention John Hurt. Really love him. Just kind of in anything, he's great here as well. I guess that's I know in this movie they were supposed to John Rhys Davies' character was supposed to be at the wedding, and he essentially said, if you're just going to have me in the movie to do a small cameo at the wedding, it's not worth it for me. I don't want to. I think it cheapens that character as well. And to be fair, like, why not have him in this movie more? Why? What was John Rhys Davies doing that you couldn't have him in this movie more? I don't know. So that was one person that we didn't get. Person we did get was Jim Broadbent, who I'm a fan of. He's not in this much either. So we don't get a lot of Broadbent. I think is it I think it's Scott Murphy on All 90s Action when he's on our podcast. I think he was saying that like every English movie that's made now has broadband in it in some way. So, which I can appreciate there. So, I think my favorite movie of his was Another Year. I think it was Mike Leach movie. Yeah, if you haven't seen that one, you should definitely check that one out. He plays character Tom in it, who him and his wife, they have an adult son. It's a really fun one. Mike Lee, not Mike Leach, Mike Lee. Sorry, I don't know where I came up with Mike Leach. But yeah, Mike Lee. But it's on Tubi right now, so you should definitely check that out. So yeah, while I'm killing, I don't know if am I killing Crystal Skulls? While I'm killing Crystal Skulls, I'm telling you to go out and see Another Year. Definitely worth time. But I guess if I'm starting to talk about other movies, it's probably good for us to take a break here. And then you can hear about my novel, Mark and Sales. You can pause this podcast, go pick up Mark and Sales, and then come back and listen to my thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's the early 90s in L.A. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. All right, we are back, and we're going to wrap up this discussion by talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So it came out in 2023. It was meant to come out sooner, and it kept getting pushed back. COVID was one reason. I guess Disney wanted to put out Beauty and the Beast before it. So there are a few reasons why it didn't come out until 2023. It bombs hard at the box office. It cost Disney probably over $100 million. Has a budget of like $380 million and barely pulls in about $380 million. So it didn't even quite pull in. The worldwide gross didn't even pull in the budget, let alone making 3 times its budget. And so the estimates had it at like 114, 120 million that it lost, but I would think it probably more than that. And the other thing, of course, is that when you lose money like that nowadays, there's no way to recoup it, right? There's no DVD sales that I guess this movie maybe more than others would have some kind of physical media buy that might recoup some of that money back. But, when you make an Indiana Jones movie in 2023 for $380 million, you're looking to pull in 1.2, 1.4, billion dollars off of that. When you think of the other properties that Disney's had, when they finally brought back Star Wars, that was a $2 million job. The big Avengers movies were $2 billion jobs. I think Disney's probably expecting something close to that for the Avengers movie at the end of this year. So I mean, if that one doesn't pull, 1.5 billion, that's going to probably be a flop for them too. But this isn't even close, right? This doesn't even hit $500 million. Forget 1.2 billion. And so the question is, why was it such a dud? Why was it such a flop? So, of course, I had no intention of seeing it when it came out in the theater. I didn't bother with it. I barely even remember it being in the theater, to be honest. Like, I don't remember. I guess I remember some ads for it. But, with me now, I don't really watch a lot of, TV other than maybe like some, maybe sometimes I'll watch like a game or something like that. But for the most part, I don't really watch anything like that. And so I don't see a lot of commercials for movies, but I mean, I knew Mandalorian Grogu was coming out, right? I knew Mortal Kombat 2 was coming out. I know when Master of the Universe and Supergirl coming out. So I don't know. It just didn't seem like the advertising got to me that much. That might also explain why it did so poorly, but also why it didn't lose as much, because you think a lot of times when you say a movie's got to make 3 times its budget back because it's got to make the advertising dollars back. If it only lost like 150 million, then that's about what their ad budget probably was, and they weren't spending much then. So maybe that was part of it. But yeah, I think there's some things to break down on this. I think there's some reasons why this doesn't do well. I fired this up on Disney Plus, and right away I'm smacked in the face by computer de-aging of Indiana Jones. It looks weird. I get, he explained, I think on, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or something, how the process worked, where like the de-aging software mined like all kinds of images of him from like the entire catalog of movies that they have of his, so they could like get the right lighting at the right times and all that stuff. But the blinking looks weird at times. I mean, yes, it's not quite as bad as Olivia Soprano on The Sopranos when she passes and they get to do like one last scene and they paste her face on somebody else. But it's weird. It's off-putting to see something like that. I think equally off-putting for me is that we get for our main baddie, we get Mads Mikkelsen, and then we get Toby Jones as the quirky scientist type who's helping out Indiana Jones. How many movies have to come out with Mads Mikkelsen as the baddie and Toby Jones as the quirky scientist type? Like, how many times do we need to see that? And so, immediately, this movie is telling me that unlike I would say especially the first, The Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I'd say, the third movie in the series, unlike those films that were changing the way movies were made, that were pushing the envelope, that were doing new things with film, this movie is trying to place itself in the modern film world. It's a follower as opposed to a leader there, right? When you're making those kind of casting decisions that other movies have been making for years now, and you're just kind of following suit and you're saying, well, yeah, we got to have Toby Jones as the quirky scientist guy. Who else can we have in that role, right? We got to have Mads Mikkelsen as our baddie, right? I mean, who else is going to be a great Nazi baddie other than Mads Mikkelsen? Yeah, you're already telling me that you're chasing. You're not doing anything new. This movie's not going to give me anything new. It's not going to give me anything interesting. This is the first of the 5 Indiana Jones films to have a black actor in the top 10 of the cast. If you like go on IMDb, and you see like the top 10 names listed, this is the first one to have a black actor that high up. Shawnette Renee Wilson. She plays Mason, who's like a CIA agent who is helping Mads Mikkelsen because he's working for the U.S. government. Then she realizes he's bad, but by that point it's too late and he kills her. Very poorly written character. It's like they told themselves when they were making this movie, hey, we haven't really had any black actors in this film series yet. We really need to have one now. And it felt like she was written by people who just, I don't know, she was like a heel jerk kind of character. And and I don't want to say like, oh, well, if you're going to be that bad about writing a black character, just don't bother, because I think that's the wrong attitude. I think you could have done a lot more with her character. One, don't make her a jerk, right? She doesn't have to be a jerk. There's no reason for her to be a jerk. She doesn't need to be sitting across from our hero and he's like, what's going on here? And she's like, well, I asked the questions. She doesn't need to do that. That doesn't need to be part of her character, because that's never a likable, good character, right? That's what the character who should be saying that is the guy with the mustache who we just wanted to see getting beaten up the whole time. Was it Brad Holbrook, I think, was the character who played the actor who played that character, who, is like punching Indiana Jones the whole movie and being a jerk the whole time. Let him say that line. Let him be the jerk off. And take Mason, take Shawnette Renee Wilson's character and make her something more. I don't know. I just think, it was, again, it's like they felt like they had to do it. It felt like they were chasing some, again, trying to catch up with something. They were like, okay, our other movies, obviously Temple of Doom, right, had a very diverse cast in it. But again, depictions in some cases of some of the cast members were not great, but, it was a diverse cast. But for the most part, these are pretty white movies. And there was a sense, I guess, in 2023 that they were like, well, we can't make it like that. And I agree, right? You don't need to be making it like that. But for example, does it have to be Toby Jones, the quirky scientist type, who's been the quirky scientist in every movie? And nothing against Toby Jones, it's just we've seen him in so many movies as the quirky scientist type that when you're casting him as your quirky scientist, you're just running over territory we've already seen before. Why not have Idris Elba play him? And you could have Shawnette Renee Wilson play his daughter, and she's coming to help him. I think you still could have had Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena, and maybe you could have still had, I don't know. You could have done some other stuff there, though. I think it was, again, it just goes back to this idea of like whoever's writing the movie is like, well, we've got to do this because we've never done it before. So we don't want to. It's almost like they don't want to be accused of not having any black actors in any of the films. So it's like, okay, well, we did this. And it's like, yeah, but you really didn't. It's not, I don't know. I felt like they could have done a better job there. And it's just sort of like, okay, what's the point? Another person they could have done a better job with, Antonio Banderas. Like he says it himself. He's like, I was pretty much just a cameo. It's like, again, the quirky, Greek fisherman that is friends with Harrison Ford. Look at that, And of course, he meets an untimely end, right? It's like he's there, he's killed off. That's it. Again, what are we doing here? One of the things that really stood out to me when I compare this movie to Last Crusade is Last Crusade. They get off the boat in Venice, and the film stock and the lighting and the coloring that Steven Spielberg uses for that scene, it feels like I'm watching like a late 60s, early 70s Italian movie with like the coloring and the it just felt like very Mediterranean. And it just reminded me of those movies. And, I think I mentioned when I was talking about Last Crusade how, like here in Philadelphia, there's, a large Italian community, and there's like a shop that sells men's clothes that has like a mini fridge with Peroni written on it and some other, accoutrements kind of around it that kind of brings me back to that feeling. Like I feel like I'm watching something like that. I'm like the color palette and all of that just reminds me of that. This movie goes to Sicily, and they actually go to Sicily as far as I know. I think that's what it said, that they were in Sicily. And it is just this washed out, drab, digital, soulless Sicily. And it's like, really? That's what we're doing with Sicily? I mean, Sicily's beautiful. Like, give me Sicily. Give me real, bright, vibrant, bright Sicily. Give me the Sicily that, like, a YouTuber with their high-def digital camera is going to show me when they walk around the city, and they've got their selfie stick out, and they've got stock music playing in the background. Like, at least it looks good there, right? At least I'm watching that. I'm like, man, I am so jealous that you're walking around Sicily like that. This is just like this gross, drab digital version of it. And again, even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Spielberg was like, I'm using film to shoot this. I'm not using digital footage. Even though Lucas had been using digital film or digital footage for his his 3 Star Wars movies that came before that, and he had gone completely over to shooting his movies in digital. Spielberg's like, no, I'm shooting this on actual film. And I mean, for $380 million, you couldn't use actual film? Like, you couldn't make this thing look nicer? It's one thing to have like 1960s, 1969 New York look drab. I get it. That's fine. Make that look drab. That works. But Sicily is beautiful. Give me a beautiful Sicily. What are you doing? And so, again, I feel like I'm watching more of the same. I don't feel like I'm watching something that is, I don't know, that's pushing the envelope, that's doing something new with cinema, that's paving a path or doing anything new. It's kind of like this thing where you're like, the movies, they were talking about how this is supposed to be a depiction of our hero being older, right? And I guess he's not supposed to be in his 80s. He's supposed to be 70. He's supposed to have been born in 1899, so he's 70 in 1969. That's his character. And I know James Mangold got defensive about like kind of the ripping this movie took, because he was saying like that people couldn't appreciate that he was an older hero. And I was like, no, that's a great story. I love the idea of him being older. I mean, that moment at the very end where he's with Karen Allen and they're talking about their dead son, which we'll talk about in a second, and they just have that moment in the kitchen together. That's like the best moment in the movie. It's fantastic. It nails everything that I want there. The whole movie should have been like that. Give me that whole movie. But yeah, no. Instead, they were going back and they were trying to remake, make another Marvel movie or whatever, make a 2020s adventure film, and that's not, Indiana Jones is supposed to do new things. It's supposed to give us new things. And so I guess the same way this was a story about an older person, it's almost like an older person who's like, trying to like rock music, and they have this moment where Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones is not happy that his neighbors are playing the Beatles really loud. And the neighbors are like, hey, somebody's on the moon right now, so we got to party. This kind of feels more like he's playing the Beatles himself, right? It's like an old franchise that, it's an old person trying to play the Beatles and act like they're hip with the kids, and I don't think I wanted that for Indiana Jones. The thing I loved about the early movies is that they were doing new things. They were even Temple of Doom with the action sequences are pushing things forward. They're doing new things, and they were doing bigger things from the first movie. Now, granted, some of that stuff was ridiculous, like the raft falling out of the plane. but it was big. It was bolder. It was bigger than anything. In 2023, that's all old hat, right? We've gone through decades of that stuff now, and so now, how do you push the envelope? How do you make it bigger? And maybe how you make it bigger is you focus on him and Karen Allen's story, and make it that the movie. I don't know. One scene we probably missed, what we could have had also was we find out that Shia LaBeouf's character is killed off. He goes to Vietnam and he dies. Now we know why he's not there. The funny thing is, for whatever reason, James Mangold couldn't admit why Shia LaBeouf wasn't there. He's like, oh, well, there was just no room for his character. There's no room for him. It's like, but you don't even mention his name. They just call him our son, your son, my son. They don't say Mutt, they don't say Mutt this or Mutt that. They never mention his name as a character at all. And that's not a matter of room, right? You've got room to change an our son to a Mutt, right? There's plenty of room for that, Mr. Mangold. And I guess the thing I don't get is why talk to us like we're dumb? Why not say, yeah, he was a shithead when it came to doing press on the movies. He's been an even bigger shithead in the last 15 years since we put this movie out. So we didn't want anything to do with him. So we killed his fucking character off, and that was it. That's all you got to say. It's that easy. We just had this Mandalorian movie come out. Obviously, it's got no Gina Carano in it. Can you imagine, Jon Favreau being like, well, we didn't have Cara Dune's character because we just didn't have any room for her. We didn't have any room for her. It's like, no, we know why she's not in the movie, because she was done by the third season. She's out, So it's weird. Again, it's just weird. It's just weird. Like James Mangold first says, oh, people didn't like the movie because they didn't want to hear about an old person's story. No, the movie it feels tired and old at this point. We've seen this movie too many times. You didn't do anything new. You didn't do anything exciting. You didn't do anything big or bigger than the other movies. So you're not honest with us about why the movie didn't do well, and then you're not honest with us about why you didn't have Shia LaBeouf in the film. I don't think it's that hard to just say, yeah, he's kind of turned into a shitty person. We didn't want him in this movie. That's easy. That's easy enough to do. I don't know. I guess maybe you don't want to talk bad about Shia LaBeouf because maybe you want to cast him in something down the road. Maybe he ends up he turns it around and is nicer. I guess I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of politics involved where you don't want to mention it. But we knew, right, why he wasn't in this movie. But anyway, But the thing I wanted in this film, and I kind of made this same joke when I was talking about The Mandalorian on the Lambcast podcast, and I don't know how well the joke went over. I don't know how much people got the joke, but I was joking. I was saying like how I wanted the third season of The Mandalorian to open with a funeral for Cara Dune's character, and then The Mandalorian standing by himself in the kitchen, and he just goes, damn. And I don't know how many people got it. And I don't know how many people listening to you here got this either. But it's if you didn't get it, I'll explain. Because people listening, they're like, oh, of course I get that joke. But one of the most iconic, killing off of a character was John Amos's character on Good Times when he dies. He complained to Norman Lear that he didn't like the way the J.J. Walker character, J.J. was being depicted on the show. He thought it was becoming a joke, and he didn't like that. And Norman Lear said, all right, we'll take it under advisement. And then he gave John Amos's character a heart attack and killed him off. And so then you've got the funeral, you got the reception, and then Florida is by herself in the kitchen, and she just goes, damn. And to me, that's like the most iconic, post-character death moment ever in a movie, in a TV show or movie or anything like that. And I really would have liked Harrison Ford to have one scene. And yes, maybe you don't want to bring up the Mutt character name because you're so sick of Shia LaBeouf and you hated the way he tried to tank the previous movie. So he's completely dead to you. It's dead to you so much that the Mutt name doesn't even get mentioned. It's just our son, your son, my son, whatever. You don't say the name. That's fine. Just show the folded up flag in the little case, that you get there. Like my mom has one of those. My grandfather passed. He was a World War II vet, and so she has one of those for him. He just looks at that flag and he just goes, damn. And that would have been enough. I think that would have told us everything we needed to know. It would have been perfect. But these movies can't have a lot of fun with themselves. The fun that they have with themselves is kind of this, like in-joke kind of crap that you're just like, really, we're doing this. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many other places I could talk about. I mean, obviously, there's time travel in this movie. They go back to ancient Rome. I guess. Hey, right? Yeah, I guess in the context of the rest of it, I don't think that bothered me as much as the fact that it was Mads Mikkelsen doing it. And I'm just like, okay, that's fine. Mads Mikkelsen will do another one. I saw an ad recently for it was for sunglasses or something, and Mads Mikkelsen was like just driving a boat somewhere, and that looked fantastic. Like, Mads Mikkelsen can advertise sunglasses. That's great. I mean, I like Mads Mikkelsen. I just feel like it's lazy casting him as your baddie all the time. It's just, we've done it so much at this point that, like, why are we doing it? Again, if Indiana Jones movies are supposed to push them, going back to the last movie, right? Kate Blanchett as your baddie. That was an inspired choice there. Later, she is the baddie in Thor Ragnarok as well, but that hadn't happened yet. That was an inspired choice to have her as the baddie, and I thought she was fantastic. Do something like that. Do something different. I'm sure Mads Mikkelsen, I'm sure he liked the payday he got for this movie, but he would have been okay if you cast him in a different role, or if you didn't have him in it at all. I think he would have been all right, and if they had a more inspired choice, they would have been okay. But yeah. So I don't know. I kind of lost track of where I was there talking about that, because I just started talking about Mads Mikkelsen, but I was talking about the time travel aspect now. Yeah, I don't think that bothered me too much. It just kind of was. I mean, the kid flying the plane. Yeah, I don't know where we're going there. I don't know what was going on there, but at this point, you're this far in the movie. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I will say, beyond the moments that he has with Karen Allen, I did like his interplay with Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Helena character. I thought she was a really good character, and I know I just wrote her out because I wanted to give Jeanette Renee Wilson a larger role, and that's I guess kind of the reality of me discussing it like that. But I really liked her in this. And I had read some reviews that people didn't like her. And I thought her character was better written. I think again, Jeanette Renee Wilson's character was very poorly written, kind of like how Kate Capshaw's character was really poorly written as well, if you remember. And Temple of Doom, right? She wasn't really well done there either. So, but I thought Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I liked that interplay. I liked her character. And I don't know how you have her in it with Jeanette Renee Wilson's character having a bigger role as well. I don't know how you could have, mitigated those two. But I'm just saying, I really appreciated that. I thought she was a cool character to add to this. I had heard there were some rumors that maybe she was going to take over the mantle as Indiana Jones, but I think the one thing this movie did do was it put the whole Indiana Jones thing to bed. So while I was saying it would have been good if they ended on Last Crusade, Crystal Skulls was so successful that once Disney got a hold of it, you knew there had to be another movie, right? They were going to make one at some point. And I guess they had started working on this one in the late 2010s, because that's about the time. I guess they were kind of wrapping up Star Wars and thinking like, okay, let's do something else here. And that's the kind of the thing with Disney. When Disney gets a hold of something, they mine it for as much as they can get. So you think of Marvel. Once they got outside of the pandemic, but even before that, when you think about phase 3 of the cinematic universe is bigger than phases 1 and 2 combined, or it's almost, I think it was like 11 movies instead of, 6 for the previous ones before it. But then like phase 4 is like more content than the first 3 phases combined. They just had to feed the monster, right? They just had to keep making stuff. They get Star Wars and they're making a movie every year, right? I think it was, 2015 was the kind of their comeback movie. 2016 was the Rogue One. 2017 was the second of the sequel trilogy. 2018 was the solo movie. And then 2019 was the last of those. And, I know that there was a sense after the Marvels came out that Bob Iger kind of wanted an agonizing reappraisal of the situation, and he wanted to kind of restart things. It is interesting, right? Because I guess, I was trying to think like this movie, coming out in 2023, I guess that would be around the time of the agonizing reappraisal of the situation, right? because the Marvels comes out in November of 2023, and that was kind of when Iger stepped in and said, we got to stop all of it. We got to, we're going to halt all the Marvel projects. We're going to, reset on Star Wars, and I think they also said we're canceling any kind of spin-offs, TV shows, or anything that we have based on Indiana Jones. And you look at that next year, they have 2023. Of course, that was people refer to it, what is Barbenheimer? Is that what they call it, right? Because it's Barbie was the number one grossing film, Superman, then Oppenheimer. Which I mean, if we think I don't know, I think the Odyssey is going to do as well as Oppenheimer this year with the loaded market that we've got for blockbusters. I don't know if it'll do quite that well, but it is interesting, right? That was, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was the number 4 grossing film that year. So it did well for Disney, but Disney, I think for how much they put into that movie, into Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and how a lot of times the third movie in the series, Thor's probably the exception, but if you think like the third Iron Man movie, the third Captain America movie, I think Spider-Man, I don't know if it was the third, I think it was by the third, they all were making $1 billion. And I think with how Guardians of the Galaxy was grossing, they were expecting that to make $1 billion. The thing is, they gave James Gunn full creative control, and he made a movie that didn't have a lot of great rewatchability. When you're dealing with animal abuse, it's a very strong subject. So that kind of, to get a movie over $1 billion, you got to have rewatchability, and that one didn't have that. So between that and the fact that The Marvels was such a dud, and then this movie, Dial of Destiny, was such a dud, they were like, oh, we need a reset. And I mean, they do come back the next year with the 3 highest grossing movies. They've got, Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, which is a Marvel movie, and Moana 2. So they do a little bit better the next year. But then I think even in 2025, again, it's their kids' movies. The Avatar movie does okay, right? Does 1.4 billion when the other two did over 2 billion. But none of the Marvel movies grossed in the top 10 in 2025. So it is interesting to kind of see, what goes on here from here. But I think at the very least, right? I mean, obviously this year is supposed to be the year of both Marvel and Star Wars. But Indiana Jones looks like it's done. It's kind of cooked at this point. And so, and I think, for Disney, again, they were going through a period where they were just mining everything as much as they could and getting as much money, extracting as many dollars out of them as possible. So it is interesting, but I think they kind of feel like if we keep making these Indiana Jones movies, we're just going to keep killing the franchise. We're going to hurt it more than we're going to save it. The other thing I think is that Harrison Ford says after this movie, I'm done making Indiana Jones movies. And I don't think anybody else should play Indiana Jones. It's either me or no one. That Gary, I think his exact line was, "The character dies with me," and I do think that would be a real tough sell if you put someone like a Chris Pratt as Indiana Jones. That would be a real tough sell to an audience. And I think after this movie being the big dud that it is, I don't think they could greenlight that kind of thing. So I guess that kind of leaves us with a situation of like where do we put this franchise all time, and where do I see it going if it goes anywhere after this? I mean, again, I think numbers 1 and 3 are some of the best adventure movies ever. I mean, they're both. I think they're also 2 movies that I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is definitely an AFI 100 years, 100 films kind of movie. I think. Last Crusade is as perfect a movie as you can get. It's right there. And so I think there are very few franchises that have Raiders of the Lost Ark and a Last Crusade in them. And so I think when you're talking about that you've got these highest of the highs. I mean, I was thinking like the Superman, for example. If you're looking at the Superman, was it 4 or 5 movies if you count the Brandon Routh one as a 5th movie. I think Superman 1 and 2, I like those movies. And I think they may be comparable to but I don't know that they're comparable to both Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade. I think if you put those 2 as a pair, I think the pair of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade are better than those pair. Star Wars, when you think of the first 3 movies, yeah, I think I would put Jedi above Temple of Doom. And so I think that might be where the tiebreaker is there for those 3 movies, is that and then when you get into the prequel trilogy, I think if you to try to make it even, I guess you do like the first 6 Star Wars versus the first 5 Indiana Jones. But I mean, even if you added on the other 3, Yeah, I think you could make a case. I think Star Wars probably does have a bit more of a draw and works a little bit better than Indiana Jones. But in terms of an iconic character, it when people hear the music, when they see the fedora, hear the whip, when they see the big rolling boulder, those are all major pieces of the zeitgeist now. And I think also too the legacy of Indiana Jones, at least with that first and third movie, is that you get this kind of this level of action, these sequences that we'd never seen in movies before, and I just think the way that happens, it's such a game changer in terms of how movies are made that I think that elevates this series up there for me as one of the best ever. By the same token, I say that though, but when I say that when I think Temple of Doom, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and Dial of Destiny are movies that I don't have a lot of real rewatchability for me. So I don't know. I'm just talking about 1 and 3 being some of the best movies ever. But I guess maybe I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be putting the series that high up. I think it's something like the Fast and Furious series, which is like 10 movies, so it's like double these movies. They take a lot of DNA from the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, and in some ways they're like a successor to that series with the way they do things. But it's not a direct successor, right? So it's not enough for us to feel like we're fully biting on Indiana Jones. They're doing something new enough with it, but it still feels like that. The Marvel movies as well. I think Kevin Feige, he takes there's a lot of the DNA from the Indiana Jones movies that he puts in there. When I think of a series that has changed action the way that the Indiana Jones movies did, I think of the John Wick films. And what's interesting is I just saw The Mandalorian and Grogu recently, and they do a real good mix of John Wick style action and then this sort of over the top, multiple chained together action sequences of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade, and in Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom has action like that as well. And so it is kind of interesting to see how now we're starting to get this mix of that DNA, of the John Wick DNA and the Indiana Jones DNA. And some of those action sequences in The Mandalorian were fantastic as a result. So I am kind of excited to see how this starts to happen, where more of the John Wick and more of the Indiana Jones comes together and makes something spectacular. And I think maybe that's the legacy of Indiana Jones, is it's not so much about making more Indiana Jones movies. I don't know that we need to do that. And again, I'm someone who likes to kind of mine IP myself. I like to do, think of other stories or other ideas for characters. But I think Harrison Ford is right that we should be done with that. Maybe if we do novels or things like that, but it's kind of done. But I do think the idea of stories and action sequences that are in the spirit of Indiana Jones, creating new characters that are in the spirit of Indiana Jones, but then you could do your own things with them. I'm hoping that that's where this goes from here, that instead of trying to make more Indiana Jones movies, that it's more about, maybe Disney creates a character, creates somebody new. Instead of trying to mine existing IP for as much money as you can get out of it, start creating new IP, start creating new characters. One of the best things about The Mandalorian is that's a new character that was created out of the Star Wars universe. Try that. Try giving us an entirely new IP altogether. Do like the guys who made He-Man, or Lucas with Star Wars, or Lucas and Spielberg with Indiana Jones. Create something completely new that we've never seen before. New characters, a new universe, a new world. That's really where Disney should be. But Disney's not like that. Disney's kind of like private equity, where they get a hold of something and they mine it for as much as they can get, and then they dump it and cast it aside. And one of the things about that I've noticed is that it's not easy to find the Indiana Jones movies on Disney Plus. So every other franchise has its own little box that you can just go to the franchise. But Indiana Jones, you either have to search for Indiana Jones on there, or you have to page through a lot of movies to get there. And I think that shows what they think of Indiana Jones now, that they've gotten as much blood from that stone and they're done with it. So, which is a shame. But I think where people have Disney Plus, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Last Crusade, those are probably once a year movies at this point. I think they're always going to be that fun for me, and I'll always watch them. So, but yeah, I guess this is as good a place as any to wrap this up. So this was an interesting look at these movies here, and it feels like I only liked 2 of the movies. it's not that I hated the other three. I think there were just a lot of issues that I had with them. And again, the rewatchability factor is not going to be there like it is for those other two. Those other two cast a really, really big shadow. There aren't many movies that are that good as those movies, I don't think. But anyway, as we wrap up, I'll do my own plugs because it's just me. dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where you can find, the reviews, links to the podcast, links to our YouTube channel, our letterbox, all of those things there. So check us out, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. My new novel, Mark and Sales, is available in Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and in paperback. I always appreciate it if you want to buy that, or if you want to buy any of my books. The link to my author page is in the description as well, so you can check that out too. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.